Hello everyone and welcome to this video. Today I'm going to be showing you 3 cool new After Effects scripting features that will give you the leg up when it comes to making scripts, as well as give you new capabilities inside of scripting itself that previously were not possible. So if you haven't already updated to the newest version of After Effects, make sure you do so and you can check these out. So feature number 1, 3D model layer support. Yes, that's right. After Effects does support 3D models now, as you probably knew, but did you know that we can detect when a layer is now 3D? You don't have to guess if the source has a GLB or a certain OBJ extension in it. We have a specific object in scripting now that can tell us if this is a 3D model or not. And with that, we can do a lot. We can start making 3D type of workflows, which is extremely powerful, especially considering it's in its nascency and there aren't many people making 3D tools yet for After Effects. So what I can actually do, I have a handful of wind turbines here. I can create a really quick script to place them out in different amounts of space, rotate them maybe, and quickly set up a scene in just a few clicks. So let's do a variable called comp. This is going to be our active item. We're going to assume that we have this composition with these wind turbines selected. We're going to create a for loop, and we're going to loop through the layers by saying that var L is equal to 1, L is less than or equal to our comp.num layers, looking through the number of layers. And then we're going to use this line here. We're going to check if comp.layerL, we're going to go through each layer, and if the current layer is an instance of a common JavaScript term to check if a certain object type is valid or present, we're going to check if it's an instance of a 3D model layer. This is the actual name that After Effects gives us to identify a 3D model layer, not an item in the project panel here, but in the actual layer stack. So if this is true, then we're going to do something to this 3D model layer. What are we going to do? Let's randomize the position and the rotation. So we pull down the position and the rotation just so we're seeing it correctly. We'll say comp.layerL.property Adobe Transform Group property Adobe Position, and we're going to set the value to something. I also want to change the Y rotation, but I don't remember how to get the Y rotation. So one way I can check this is to write a single line of script code that grabs my composition, so say app.project.activeItem, and the selected properties. If I grab the first element of our selected properties and get the match name, and I make sure I select the Y rotation, you can see the match name here is Adobe Rotate Y. So I'm going to duplicate this line, and instead of Adobe Position, say Adobe Rotate Y. So first, let's go ahead and randomize the Y position. We don't want it to be 0 necessarily. Let's choose a random number. We'll say math.floor, because we're going to essentially round whatever we're randomly generating here. Math.random, this will generate a random number between 0 and 1.0. We're going to multiply that random number by, say, I was going to do a negative sort of thing, but let's just keep it positive. So several rotations, let's do like 1000. This will generate a random rotation between 0 and 1000 for each of these wind turbines. Additionally, for the position, it's a little more tricky to randomize that because we don't want it to get too crazy. So what we'll do is we'll get the original position by saying dot value. We'll say var position is equal to the value of our position. And then we'll simply say position plus an array of, I'm going to copy this expression here and change it to like 500. And this is an array of 3 values. And we'll do that. I'm also going to add a begin undo group here, because if we're making a whole bunch of operations, we want to be able to easily undo it. So say begin undo group, end undo group. Let's call this geek stuff. Now let's go ahead and run it and see what happens. Make sure we have our comp selected. And it looks okay. but I guess the distance they've gone isn't too much. So maybe we don't do this position addition. Like I said, we have an easy one-click undo. Let's run the script again. We need to make sure we have a comp selected. You can see once again, they're kind of all out of whack. So let's increase this to like, I don't know, just random big numbers. Like that. And let's get a camera in here. And pan. You can see they're quite far away. Zoom out. Now, obviously, this is very random and not necessarily ideal, but in this case, we've basically identified all the 3D models in our scene and been able to quickly automate them into sort of a spread of windmills. The main thing to get out of it is checking the instance of 3D model layer of any given layer, and you can make cool 3D workflows. Cool feature number 2 is new font options. Now we can get a list of any of the used fonts inside of our project, as well as replace fonts globally throughout the entire After Effects project. So in order to get a list of all the fonts, we're going to say var fonts is equal to app.project.used fonts. And then we'll go ahead and write our fonts as well as the fonts.length to see how many there are. And you can see I just threw in a couple here. So we get an object, 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 object. So an array of 5 objects of length 5, font objects. These are all the fonts in object form represented in our project. There are tons of potential uses for this, of course, as creative as you want to be. But if you wanted to say identify any bad fonts or fonts that are good in a project, this would be a very quick way to do it. You can get one of these individual fonts by just saying fonts 0, for example. And then you could say, if you alert or show this font, it's just an object. But in After Effects, for any given font object, we have several important properties we can get. Let's go ahead and get the font dot family name, the font dot style name, and see what that gives us. Okay, so it turns out the fonts object is actually a property within this font. So if we say fonts0.font, then we can see we have the Poppins font in medium style. So the fonts object list, for each one of those indexes, you have to get the font property in order to get the font object. And that's where you can get the name of it and all that. So now we can take a look at the replace font method. This will allow us to say globally change a font we don't like. Let's say we have several examples of this Poppins font and we want to change it to something else. So we're going to get a from font, right? This is the very first font we detect. In this case, this is the Poppins font. We know for a fact, we checked that already. And then we're going to get a font list. Why are we going to get a font list? Because we need a font to replace it with. So we're dealing with lots of from and to fonts and font lists. The word font is becoming strange to say. So just as an example, we're going to get Times New Roman by saying app.fonts, get fonts by PostScript name. That's sort of the match name of fonts. So we're getting the Times New Roman PSMT, which is the sort of match name for that. And because this might return a whole bunch of Times New Roman fonts, like Times New Roman medium, bold, italicized, we just want one of them. So it's going to be a list of Times New Roman fonts. We just want one of them. And here, let's go ahead and right line our from fonts.family name and then our to fonts.family name before we do our replacement. You can see we have Poppins as our from font and Times New Roman as our to font. Now the layer changed is kind of a misnomer from the guide. This returns a bool, not an actual layer, so we don't need it. We're going to say app.project.replace font. We need a from font. What are we replacing? Into what? So when we click this, all of our Poppins should change into Times New Roman. And as you can see, all of them in the entire project will have done so. And easily the coolest thing about this is that you don't have to do any kind of loops. You don't have to find all the text layers. This is just going to replace your fonts and give you control at the global scale automatically for your entire project. And feature number 3, would you be surprised if I said there are more font things to do? There are more font things. This next list is very niche and may not apply to a lot of people, but this gives you some kind of insight into how you can maybe look into some of these more unused new features and create something cool. So the new things are the following. Favorite font family list. This means that if you have any favorite fonts listed here, like this, then we can get a list of all those specific fonts. We have fonts duplicate by PostScript name. Apparently, it's perfectly legal and common for more than one font object to return the same PostScript name. I did not know that. So this will be helpful in doing that and identifying any duplicate fonts that may have gotten mixed and mashed up during your project. Another interesting one is freeze sync substituted fonts. As you know, when you're missing fonts in an After Effects project, it attempts to find them and can do some kind of syncing with Adobe fonts. You can freeze this process. Maybe it's slowing down your project or preventing it from opening. Maybe you just want to prevent it in the future because you have a big project with lots of stuff. This will allow you to actually freeze that automated process. Another interesting thing is to use the most recently used font family list. That's right. Just like we have the favorites in the fonts here, we have a sort of section at the top of your most used ones. And with this, we can access those and get the most recently used fonts. Maybe you want to automate that and say, anytime we have a project open for the first time, replace all the fonts with the most recent ones because those ones are good. Whatever, be super creative with these. These are pretty interesting methods and properties. The next one is a little bit complicated and extremely niche. This is substituted font replacement match policy. What does this mean? Essentially, when the substituted fonts are being found, there are certain criteria that they require. What are we looking for to see if this missing font is found on Adobe Fonts or somewhere else? Well, typically you might think it's just the name, but there are different criterion for this. There is the PostScript name, which is the default, and the CTFI equal. With the PostScript name, again, the default, it's just checking that the PostScript name is matching. For example, if you're somehow missing Times New Roman, perhaps with this particular policy, it's only going to look on Adobe Fonts for something with the PostScript name Times New Roman PSMT. But if you change this to say CTFI equal, this is going to check a lot of different properties, specifically the PostScript name, so this right here, the technology, the writing scripts, and the design vector. And it turns out there's also a disable one so that there is no font object that can be replaced. This would be a good way to overwrite if you have a font that keeps going missing and you just want to leave it as is. And you might be wondering, what is like a font technology? It turns out there is technology embedded as a property. You see we have TrueType, bitmap, all that kind of stuff. Same with writing scripts. What is that? Another property. These are just different scripts. You have Roman, Japanese, all the different types of characters. And then also design vector. What is this? It's an array of floating point values and it has design axes built in. So I'm actually unfamiliar with what that is, but in terms of usefulness, if you think about checking if the PostScript name is there, that's great, but also checking if the technology of the type of font it is, if it was an older font or a new font, that may be useful, or writing scripts. If for some reason a Japanese and a Romanized font have the same match name, but you want to make sure it's in a Japan specific one, you could use the writing scripts check under the CTFI equal. And if I do run this and get these right lines under favorite font family list, I do have my recently added ones, Trebuchet and Verdana. Under duplicate PostScript names, you can see I have a whole lot of Montserrats. Is the freeze sync substituted fonts enabled? False. What most recently used fonts have I used? These ones. What's our font policy? It's an enumeration, so you're going to have to modify that manually. And then for this last one I didn't discuss, I didn't write it. It's the pull for and push non-system font folder changes. If you ever have to use this, I hope you don't have to type it because that took forever to say. Basically what this will do is allow you to refresh the fonts folder and get updates to your fonts. Simple as that for such a long name. But that's going to do it for this video, guys. I hope you enjoyed. That's 3 cool new After Effects scripting features, 3D model layer, used fonts and replacing fonts, as well as new font object and controls. If you enjoyed the video, hit the thumbs up button down below, hit subscribe and the bell icon to be notified of new videos coming out when I post them, and check out the links in the description to support and join the Discord. Thanks for watching. We'll see you next time.